In 1873, the United States Army adopted a new cartridge for a new rifle. That same year, a gunmaker named Remington signed a contract to build something else entirely, a writing machine, the Scholes and Glidden typewriter. The Smithsonian records that Remington put it on the market the following year, 1874, for $125. Now think about everything that came after: smokeless powder, bolt actions, pointed bullets, telescopic sights, belted magnums, synthetic stocks, rangefinders that fit in a shirt pocket. Every one of those was a reason to leave the .45-70 behind, and for a while, America did, almost completely. Two products, same company town, same industrial moment, same year on the paperwork. That writing machine belongs in a museum now. The cartridge doesn't. In 2026, 153 years later, a major American manufacturer put a brand new rifle on the market chambered for it. Carbon fiber wrapped barrel, ghost ring sights. Optics ready, around $2,400. Cartridges die, hundreds of them have. Something better shows up and buries them, exactly the way progress is supposed to work. So why not this one? The answer has very little to do with nostalgia. If one cartridge really can handle almost every big game problem in North America, why doesn't every hunter just buy one, chamber it, and end the argument? Because the argument never ends. 50 years of it, in gun shops and at camp tables. And the people arguing aren't stupid. They're looking at the same cartridge and reaching opposite conclusions. Is it recoil? Trajectory? The rifle? Or is the question itself wrong? Here's the frame for the next 20 minutes. Power is never free. Every time this cartridge gets more impressive, a bill arrives somewhere else. Recoil, weight, distance, confidence, choice. Call it the bill you pay for having more than enough. And that bill behaves strangely. In thick timber, several of the .45-70's weaknesses almost disappear. Put the same rifle in open Western country, and those same weaknesses become the whole story. And in bear country, the place everybody actually argues about, the agencies that deal with bears for a living don't start the conversation with caliber at all. We'll get to all three. But to understand why any of it works, you have to see how this cartridge nearly died once already. It didn't begin as a hunting cartridge. It began as a procurement decision. In 1873, the Army standardized on a new breech-loading rifle and a new cartridge to feed it. Springfield Armory built it. Collectors call it the Trapdoor, because the breech block hinges up and forward like a little door. The name wasn't marketing. It's a spec label in the shorthand of the era. Bore diameter, then the black powder charge the government put behind it. That's simply how cartridges were named in 1873. The Smithsonian records the 7th Cavalry receiving its first shipment of these carbines in June of 1874, replacing Civil War Sharps and Spencers. 2 years later, most of the men under Custer carried them at the Little Bighorn. And the Park Service, at Springfield Armory, puts Trapdoor production in that caliber at more than 500,000 rifles and carbines. 500,000. That's not a cartridge earning fans one at a time. That's an industrial supply chain, arsenals, ammunition plants, freight contracts, surplus dealers, pointed at one round for 20 years. When the Army finally moved on, all of it washed into civilian hands. Hunters didn't make this cartridge common. The government did. Hunters just found it lying everywhere. And recoil was already part of the Army's problem in the 1870s. The cavalry carbine was shorter and lighter than the infantry rifle, and the standard load punished the man behind it. So the Army issued the cavalry a reduced version of the same cartridge, less powder behind the same bullet, specifically to make it manageable from horseback. Within about a year of adopting the most powerful shoulder cartridge in American service, the government quietly toned it down. Because power the shooter can't manage isn't power. It's noise and a flinch. The bill was on the table from the beginning, and the first customer to pay it wore a uniform. There's a sentence in almost every video about this cartridge, and it isn't quite true, that the .45-70 is the cartridge that wiped out the buffalo. It belongs to that era, Springfield's absolutely turned up in the hands of market hunters. But the commercial hunt was already running before the Army adopted it in 1873, and the men doing it for money worked with a whole family of big-bore single shots. Sharps rifles above all. Sharps introduced a heavier 50 caliber round in 1872, built specifically for bison. The herds didn't fall because of a cartridge. They fell because hide prices, railroads, and federal policy made those animals worth more dead than alive. Hold on to that one. It comes back later. This cartridge keeps collecting credit and blame for outcomes that were actually produced by everything around it. Then chemistry happened. Smokeless powder burned cleaner and made far more velocity from far less bulk, and it made a new kind of bullet practical. Long, pointed, aerodynamic, bolt-action repeaters followed, then optics. And suddenly, the American hunter had something he'd never had, a rifle he could zero and trust across a canyon. The 45-70 couldn't follow him there. Wide, heavy, blunt, a shape that trades distance for mass. Next to a flat-shooting bolt gun with glass on top, it looked like exactly what it was. Hunters left. The Army had already left. By the early 1890s, it had replaced the Trapdoor with a bolt-action repeater, firing a smokeless cartridge. And that should have been the end of it. Here's how completely it ended. By the mid-1960s, the 45-70 had all but disappeared from the American market. There was no big-bore cartridge available in any lever-action rifle in current production. So in 1964, Marlin and Remington built a new one to fill the hole. The 444 Marlin, essentially a stretched .44 Magnum case, made to occupy the big-bore lever gun slot the 45-70 had left empty. Not a tribute, a replacement. Then, in 1971, a company called Harrington and Richardson turned 100 years old. To celebrate its own centennial, not the cartridges, H&R reissued America's first general-issue breech-loading rifle, a replica Trapdoor, chambered, of course, in 45-70. Pure nostalgia, a commemorative, the kind of thing that sells once and vanishes. Instead, it started a chain reaction. Ruger chambered its single shots for it. And in 1972, Marlin brought back the model 1895. In the cartridge, Marlin itself had worked around 8 years earlier. The 444 is a specialty item today. The 1895 became one of the best-selling lever guns in the country. The replacement is still around. The thing it replaced came back stronger. And notice what actually happened there. America didn't save this cartridge by pretending it was modern. It handed it a job modern cartridges weren't trying to do. Most videos about this cartridge run a list of animals: coyote, hog, elk, moose, grizzly, polar bear. Check, check, check. Cartridge wins every round. That list proves nothing, because it only asks one question. Can it? Yes, it can. That was never in doubt. So stop asking what animals it can handle. Start asking what environments make its disadvantages disappear. There are 3. Job 1 is where this cartridge is more gun than the problem requires. A coyote in a field, a hog at 70 yards in the open. Nothing there demands a heavy, wide, slow bullet, and a dozen lighter cartridges do it with less recoil, more capacity, less rifle to carry, and a flatter zero. Capability isn't suitability. A sledgehammer will drive a finish nail. That doesn't make it the right hammer. Job 2 is where the reputation starts to make sense. Heavy-bodied animals, close, in cover you can't see through. Timber, swamp edge, river bottom, cane. Shots measured in yards, not hundreds of yards. In that world, everything the 45-70 is bad at stops costing you anything. Nobody's shooting across a canyon in a cedar thicket. Trajectory doesn't matter when the shot is short. Magazine capacity doesn't matter much when the encounter is over in seconds either way. And mass, frontal area, deep straight-line penetration, that's exactly what the job rewards. That's why it survives. Not because it's best. Because inside one narrow set of conditions, its weaknesses go quiet, and its one real advantage is the only thing left on the table. And job 3 is the one everybody clicked for. Bear country. Here's where the internet expects a verdict. Is the 4570 enough for a big bear? Watch what the agencies do with that question. They don't answer it, they change it. The National Park Service says plainly that firearms are not recommended for stopping a bear attack. Their reasoning is practical, not political. A charging bear is a hard target. A wounded bear is a more dangerous bear. A firearm in a panicked moment is a hazard to whoever's standing next to you. NPS recommends bear spray and calls both spray and firearms the last items in the toolbox. Alaska Department of Fish and Game is talking to a different audience. They know hunters are already carrying a rifle. So their guidance isn't put it down, it's carry a second deterrent, such as bear spray, and keep it where you can actually reach it. Now notice what neither agency is doing. Neither one treats caliber as the first layer of the problem. They both start somewhere else. Don't surprise the animal. Make noise. Watch for sign. Manage food and carcasses. Keep your deterrent on your body, not buried in your pack. Learn the difference between a bear that feels threatened and one that's simply curious. And be honest about what stress does to your hands. That's not the agencies saying a rifle does nothing. It's them saying the rifle is the last item on a list, and the first items are where almost every outcome is actually decided. Bear safety is a system, not a caliber ranking. Which is the same lesson as the buffalo, wearing different clothes. We keep handing single objects the credit for outcomes that were produced by everything around them. Which brings the bill back into the room. Because if you strip away the mythology, you're not buying power. You're buying a trade. By the way, the questions in this section are written out on one page in a free guide, linked below. No email, no upsell. If you're weighing this cartridge before you spend money or plan a trip, that page will save you an argument with yourself. One honest note first. Rifles chambered for this cartridge cover an enormous range of designs and eras, and factory ammunition is built for different intended uses. That's a manufacturer and manual question for your specific rifle every single time, not something to work out from internet folklore. Read the manual. Follow the ammunition specifications for that firearm. Recoil is where gun culture usually behaves badly. The old line is that real men handle it. That line is worthless, and it's probably cost more animals a clean shot than any cartridge choice ever made. Here's the useful version. Every extra unit of power asks something from the shooter. A heavier rifle, or a harder push, or both. Practice, to stay calm through the shot. A body that can absorb it, in November, from an awkward position, in a coat. And here's the sentence worth writing down. A cartridge does not get credit for power the shooter cannot consistently manage. That's not an argument against the 4570. It's an argument for honesty about who's holding it. An older hunter who picks something milder isn't soft. He's making a controllability decision, the same one the Army made in 1874. A younger shooter who flinches isn't unmanly. He's untrained, and he'll fix it faster behind a rifle that isn't teaching him to close his eyes. And a man who shoots this cartridge calmly, from field positions, has earned something most owners never bother to earn. The rifle only knows what you can do with it. Cold, one time, when it counts. The second line on the bill is distance. This cartridge was born into a different ballistic world, and physics charges rent for a wide, blunt bullet. Modern cartridges built for open country do the faraway work more easily. That isn't a debate. But what if the person buying it doesn't need that job? A hunter in thick northern timber and a hunter glassing sagebrush across a mile of open country aren't solving the same problem. One needs reach, the other needs to end things quickly, at conversational distance, in cover, sometimes with an animal already moving. The winner changes when the job changes. There's one more possibility, and it's the one that finally makes the survival make sense. Maybe the cartridge isn't what people are actually buying, because it has never lived alone. It lives inside a specific kind of rifle, short, simple, fast to work with cold hands. You can top it off one round at a time without taking it out of action. It slides into a scabbard, rides in a canoe, hangs on a tree stand hook, and doesn't mind weather. And that platform has changed jobs over and over. Government rifle, frontier rifle, historical curiosity, commemorative, guide gun, modern woods rifle with a rail on top. Some cartridges survive because the numbers stay competitive. Others survive because the rifle around them keeps finding a new job. So a lot of people who say they love the 4570 are describing something wider than a cartridge, a short lever gun, iron sights, close cover, a way of hunting that requires getting near enough to feel it. That's an identity, and identities don't get replaced by better numbers. But be careful with that, because it cuts both ways. Identity explains why the demand is still here. It doesn't make the ballistics better than they are. Those are two different claims, and they get mixed together constantly. Which answers the question we opened with. Why not just own one 4570 and stop arguing? Because can do the job and built for the job are two different sentences. An adjustable wrench will turn almost every bolt on a truck. It'll also round off the ones that matter and leave you wishing you'd carried the right socket. Nobody says the adjustable wrench is useless. They argue about which drawer it belongs in. The 4570 is the adjustable wrench of American big game. Enormously capable, rarely optimal, occasionally irreplaceable. And that last word is the one people skip. There are situations where nothing in the drawer does it better. There are just far fewer of them than the internet suggests. So why did it survive? Not because America failed to invent something better. America invented hundreds of things better. Better trajectory, better recoil, better range, better capacity. On paper, it has been beaten at every individual job it does. It survived because nobody eliminated the job. Big animal, close cover, short rifle, one decisive hit at a distance where flatness is worthless and mass is everything. That writing machine went to a museum because the world stopped needing it. Nothing ever stopped needing this. Wet timber before daylight. Breath showing. A man thumbing rounds into a tube magazine. In a cartridge, some government clerk wrote a specification for 153 years ago. A tool doesn't become obsolete when something newer beats it on paper. It becomes obsolete when the problem it solves disappears. I've watched a lot of gear arguments end the second somebody says out loud what job they're actually solving. So say yours in the comments. Real distances, real cover, the weight you actually carry. Free one-page guide is below, and subscribe if this is how you'd rather think about gear.